We're back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Tuesday, and we have a regular guest that's joining us today, Eric from Iowa. A lot of folks comment on Eric's comments, and he's got some interesting insights and some perspectives. It's always a pleasure to have him on the show. Eric, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me. I love being on the podcast.
We should let people know before we get too deep into this. Eric is now on TikTok and on YouTube. And if you go to TikTok, it's under Analytical Iowan. Same goes for YouTube, Analytical Iowan. You hear the great stuff here on the podcast. He's got some stuff every day on TikTok and YouTube. I would encourage you to check it out. I see it. I mean, on my For You page, you're coming up every fucking 10 minutes. So I can't miss you it that way. But, I was thinking about this, Eric, and this goes, only old people will understand this reference. But because you were most known about being on the Rational Boomer podcast, it's like the 70s version of a spinoff. Eric, or the Analytical Iowan, is a spinoff
Yes.
of the Rational Boomer podcast. So Eric, I see you as kind of this generation's Laverne and Shirley. Just saying.
I like it. I like it.
Not quite as
which
funny.
is actually funny because I'm getting comments now on TikTok. Oh, of course not. But I'm getting comments and messages on TikTok asking me when I'm coming back on the podcast.
Oh, really? Well, anytime you want, just send me an email. And
Yeah.
in fact, you're going
I've
to be
gotten
on.
several people.
Good. And you're going to be on here, and then I think you're going to be on early next week too, because I'm going to be on the road, and I want to have something in the bank in case I can't do it sitting in a hotel somewhere down around the Keys. But anyway, I don't have to ask you what you're thinking about. Anybody just has to watch your TikToks, and you're thinking about all the same things I'm thinking about, all the same things that the folks listening are thinking about. And obviously, it's Tuesday. It's the starting back up of Donald Trump's trial. And if you've seen Donald Trump lately sitting in there, trying to behave, trying to be quiet, sitting still, to me, this looks like it's really taken a toll on Donald Trump.
Oh, I think it really has. He looks old. He looks terrified. Um, he does not portray that strongman image. When he came out the other day carrying that stack of papers and news articles that he was rifling through, he really looked like the old man, get off my lawn type
Right.
person. Um, it's not the image he wants to portray. It doesn't work the way he thinks it does. And I don't remember if you said it or if I heard it from somebody else that was covering the trial around that time with all those articles, that they're paying somebody $100,000 to find him articles that flatter him and tell him what he wants to hear. And that's where he got the stack from.
Yeah.
And that's how he prints them off, because he only sees the articles that flatter him or say the things he wants to hear. He doesn't see all of the countless articles calling him a buffoon, saying the trial's going badly, that he's going to lose. He doesn't see any of it because his ego wouldn't let him take it.
No. And,
they keep it away from him.
That's the thing that I'm amazed by, because I'll get people coming to my page and they'll say, "Oh, the case in New York is falling apart." And I've looked at all the news stories, read the transcripts, heard from the reports from inside. It's not falling apart. It's going horrifically for Donald Trump. I mean, just with David Pecker, there was enough evidence there to put the motherfucker in jail. I don't know where they're getting that it's falling apart, or they're just trying to gaslight and hoping the people will buy into it, but nobody is. Certainly not Judge Marchand.
No. I don't know where they're getting the it's falling apart thing, other than it's not being, I don't think, covered genuinely in right-wing media circles.
No, true.
Um, they're they're still playing up to what Donald Trump said and did. You know, and how he portrays this as a witch hunt and all of this. And I think that's where they get some of this idea that it's not going very well. And it's also part of it, it's their hope that they hope it doesn't go well. Like they can't admit that they're back to a loser like Donald Trump. So it's gotta go badly. In this case, it's gotta go badly for the prosecution because it affects how they view themselves a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, they have a history of doing these types of things. They have a history of, oh, Donald Trump will win in 2020. Definitely will win in 2020. There'll be a red wave in 2022. Donald Trump will never be indicted. He'll never go to court. I don't know if it's wishful thinking or they actually think they're accomplishing something by saying these things and convincing people otherwise. I mean, when the end result comes out, they look like fools anyways. I don't know why they insist on continuing to do this, but that does seem to be their normal form. Speak out loudly those things they want, not necessarily what they're going to get.
Yeah, that is how they operate. I mean, they look at this trial, they don't see the criminality. Like I did a video about they were talking about what was it, that Pharaoh, the third witness.
Right.
Third witness, yeah, the one who the banker, and how that Michael Cohen lied on the form to get the account or whatever, and said no, this isn't for political reasons. And I had a Trump the fuck come on my page and say something like, well, yeah, see, Michael Cohen did it. You know, that just proves Cohen did it. But who did it benefit? That you
Right.
know, they can't think that next step. It's
No.
like no, they did it to benefit Donald Trump. Michael Cohen had no dog in the fight with this Stormy Daniels thing. You know, it wasn't going to be his name drugged through the mud if she sold her story to some newspaper and it got out there before the election. He only ever did that because it was for Donald Trump, and they don't want to see that next step. And it's going to be, and then when Cohen gets on the stand, they're not going to believe his testimony.
Well,
So I don't know. I don't get it.
I had something, I got an explanation on this with Michael Cohen. And of course, when he goes on the stand, they're going to say he's a liar, he's a perjurer, he went to jail, not mentioning the fact that he did all of this in order to benefit Donald Trump. Like you say, he didn't sleep with Stormy Daniels. He didn't have to shut her mouth to not get elected president. He was just doing the bidding of his Lord and Master, Donald Trump, at the time. And that's the only way you can explain it. But I was listening to Glenn Kirshner or Andrew Weissman or somebody talking about this. They were asking, what are they going to do because the credibility for Michael Cohen is suspect because he did go to jail and he was giving perjury on the stand and tax evader and all this other stuff. What good does it do to have him on there if he has no credibility? And the way they explained it to me is he knows a lot. All these little witnesses, was it Rhonda or Graff is her name, Rona Graff, who was Donald Trump's assistant,
Yeah.
and the banker, and presumably other witnesses here. If these people can, and most likely will, corroborate what Michael Cohen says, then it's hard to say he's lying. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get, the real dirt from Michael Cohen and then get it corroborated by these smaller witnesses so the jury can see, yeah, maybe he's a convicted felon, but it matches up with all these other witnesses. And I think that's a pretty smart strategy.
Oh, it definitely is a smart strategy. I mean, Michael Cohen, yeah, he's going to be a little suspect. But I think the thing you're going to find that these jurors are going to have to weigh is even if they couldn't corroborate everything, like we were just talking about, who did Michael Cohen do those things to benefit?
Right.
And if you can draw those connections, you know, that actually, even though he did them, it raises his credibility in some ways as a witness because it proves his motive for doing the things you're trying to discredit him for. even
Right.
though he's not on trial.
Well, they're talking about having Hope Hicks on this week. I don't know for sure if that's what's going to happen, but she's coming up shortly. And Hope Hicks is going to be a problem for Donald Trump because she was the closest to Donald Trump, even more so than Meadows. She was with him all the time. She was said to have the most influence over Donald Trump. If he starts getting unhinged, she could calm him down. She was handling everything with him. She was standing next to him all the time. But the important thing that people need to remember, she was his friend, maybe still thinks fondly of him, but she is a witness for the prosecution. So she isn't there to do Donald Trump any favors. And it's going to be hard for him to deny, divert, distract, whatever, anything she says. And she will lend to the corroboration that Michael Cohen is putting out or Stormy Daniels. That one's going to be a tough one for Donald because he likes Hope Hicks, but she's not going to be saying the things he wants to fucking hear.
Oh, I don't think she will. But the other thing is, since she's a witness for the prosecution, if her testimony starts going too far off the rails,
Yeah.
the prosecution can just stop asking her questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if she goes too far off script and starts really trying to help Donald Trump and maybe making things up or whatever, they can just stop talking to her. And she's not going to probably risk a perjury charge because they know what she knows, and she's already told them what she knows. So if she tries to lie on the stand for Donald Trump, they could nail her for that too. So I don't think it's going to help him one bit. Um, and even if he thinks somehow she's going to come in and save him by this awesome testimony, it won't happen because they'll shut her down before it happens.
Well, and I think that's the important thing to remember. Any witness that comes up there that lies on the stand is subject to being prosecuted and found guilty of perjury. And Alvin Bragg did the very smart thing prior to the start of this election. He did just that to Alan Weisselberg. He lied in Letitia James' lawsuit. Alan Weisselberg did. That motherfucker's sitting in jail right now. So that's a good little sign to these folks that we aren't going to be fucking around. And if you lie, you're going to go to jail. So I think that was a good strat. I don't know if it was a strategy for Alvin Bragg, but it's got to make them stop and think. And at this point, they see Donald Trump going off the cliff. They know he's not savable at this point. So all they can hope to do is save themselves.
Yeah, I don't know if it might have been somewhat of a strategy, but I don't think it was entirely intentional. I think he saw the opportunity present itself. It
Yeah,
kind of just fell in his lap, and he
I
went,
think so.
"Well, you know what? Let's get this done because I have this information. Let's do it because it needs done." And then it just kind of fell in place, and it lined up with this trial, which
Yeah.
ends up proving then, that if you lie on the stand in this case, I've already took somebody down for perjury, a big witness for Donald Trump. I can take you down too. And like I said, I don't think it was anything like he went out looking for a reason to nail Alan Weisselberg or anything. I think it all just kind of fell into place.
Well, we all have those days, when things fall in place and work just like they're supposed to. It's like your biorhythms are up or something. And I think that's where Alvin Bragg is with this case, that falling in his lap beforehand and the way things are going with David Pecker. I mean, if anybody was going to lie for Donald Trump, it would be David Pecker because they are buddies for 10, 15 years. He is a slimy son of a bitch. So if anybody was going to lie, it's going to be this motherfucker, but he didn't. He implicated Donald Trump in a lot of shit. And it's funny, we haven't heard Donald Trump talk shit about David Pecker as yet. He's just kind of let it go. That's weird.
Well, I don't know if Donald Trump realizes how bad David Pecker's testimony is because I watching the little bits I saw about the cross examination and stuff, they were focused on about three things. They were trying to make him out to be a liar, which didn't really land. It wasn't very successful. And it was all over small stuff that was
Yeah.
easily refuted. Um, Then they tried to what was it? He lied about some stuff, and then there was that he was misremembering some stuff, or that he was lying. Yeah, that he was misremembering things. And then but the big one was Donald Trump's defense of it was everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
Was kind of the thing they tried to land. And I think Donald Trump thinks that actually does work. And I think that's why he's saying, he's not saying much about David Pecker. Now, I did a TikTok on this, and I used the analogy of I'm speeding down the interstate. I'm
Yeah.
doing 10 over. Everybody's keeping pace with me, but the cop pulls me over. I can't use the fact that there were 20 cars around me all doing 10 over to get out of the ticket. I'm still in the wrong.
Right.
But that's what Donald Trump is trying to say.
Well, that's exactly it. People think, well, everybody's doing it, so I should get away with it. And, maybe there is some truth to that theoretically. But the fact is, if you get pulled over or you get caught for a crime and you were doing the crime, regardless of who else is doing it, you're in violation. You will get prosecuted and probably convicted. And that's what Donald Trump has to learn. He's used to being the favored son to get away with everything. And now he's the guy that doesn't get away with anything at all. And it's confusing and foreign to him.
Oh yeah, he has no idea how this is actually working.
He
You
can't
can
believe
tell
it.
by the way he goes out. No, like he rails against the judge. Um, did you see he tried to get a new trial in the E. Jean Carroll $83 million
I did.
verdict?
And they said
And
no.
the judge said no. They told him to go fuck yourself. But I said about this, he spends all this trial railing against the judge, calling him everything but a nice guy, and just has nothing good to say about him and how he ran his court and dragging his staff through the mud and all of this. Then afterward goes hat in hand and says, please, judge, can you lower the amount? How about a new trial? Do me a
Yeah.
favor. I'm good. You like me. You can do me a favor, can't you? And he thinks that works. And I don't understand where he comes from, except from the fact that he bullies people his entire life and he pushes them around and then comes back later and asks them to do something because they're toadies. They do it for him.
Right. Well, we're seeing it real time. And I think Donald Trump, that's how he did things. He'd go after people, call them out, talk shit about them, and then come back and be their buddy. And they're just happy that Donnie likes him now, back when he was in business. But he's doing the same thing with Ron DeSantis down in Florida. Nobody talked more shit about Ron DeSantis than Donald Trump, and nobody talked more shit about Donald Trump than Ron DeSantis. And here they are getting together down in Florida because Donnie needs money and Ron DeSantis' career politically is almost over. And they think these two losers can get together and fucking rekindle whatever they had. It's a joke. It won't happen. But that's who these fucking people are.
Well, I had an interesting thought about that. On top of the fundraising thing, I mean, we've talked about it. Donald Trump needs money. The RNC's not bringing in money. He's not bringing in money. He's trying every grift under the sun. So now he's trying this thing with DeSantis. But like you said in your TikTok about it, DeSantis is done politically.
Yeah.
He can't run for governor again. He really doesn't have a shot at the Senate. So maybe his plan here is to buddy up to Donald Trump, and he's delusional enough to think they can get him elected. But maybe Donnie will pick him for VP, or maybe Donnie will pick him for a cabinet position or something, get him a higher position and raise his status again.
Well, I've heard people talk about that prospect, and I don't know if this is a rule or an unwritten rule, but apparently there's something that said you can't have a president and a vice president from the same state. I don't know if that is a policy by the RNC or a law or whatever, but we know that there's a lot of laws that can be shut down because Ron DeSantis also shouldn't have been able to campaign for the presidency while he was governor, and they gamed that system for him too. I don't know. I don't see. I don't think Ron DeSantis does him any good because he needs somebody from another swing state to get some support.
Yeah, that I don't think it's a rule or a law or anything. I think what it always has been is you pick people from different states
Right.
to bolster your campaign because you should carry your home state theoretically, unless you're a nut job running, if you're a Republican that's running for presidency from a blue state or something,
Right.
maybe not. But then you pick somebody from a different state where you're gonna bring in supporters, bring in a different batch of donors, all that stuff. So yeah, having them both come out of Florida politically is a bad idea. I mean, they kind of run in the same political circle. They talk to the same donors all the time. Um, it just I don't think it would do him any good. Plus, that they're too similar. They butt heads all the time. Donald Trump doesn't want a strong vice presidential candidate.
No, no.
He needs an underling, kind of like Mike Pence.
Right. He needs a weak, toady piece of shit. That's what he needs. And the thing about it is everybody's worried about who's going to be his vice president. There's no way in hell he's going to be elected, so it doesn't really fucking matter. Nobody he can pick can save him at this point. I wanted to ask you something. I wanted to ask your opinion on something. I heard an explanation of this regarding the trial. We know that Donald Trump has violated the gag order 15, 16 times. We know that there's been a hearing about this, and Judge Marchand has reserved a decision on it, and he has not come up with a decision. And a lot of people are upset about that because they want to see Donald Trump punished for his yakking and violating the gag order. And nobody really understands why it's taking so long to make this answer. I mean, I'm sure Marchand knows the answer right now. Why doesn't he just say it? And the way somebody explained it was he said that he knows Donald Trump wants to go into jail, at least for a day or so, because he thinks it'll help him in fundraising and image and all that stuff. I don't think he really, once he gets to jail, he's going to say, oh, I fucked up. But from the outside, he wants to go in. And since the judge knows that, and because it would cause quite a bit of chaos and trouble within the trial itself, what they're suggesting is that Marchand is just holding this fucking hammer over his head. I'm reserving judgment. Get out of hand, motherfucker, and I'm going to bring that hammer down. And he may ultimately anyway, when it's all said and done. But the one thing you've noticed is Donald Trump has been a little quieter when it comes to the DA, the judge, the staff, the witnesses. He's still saying shit, but he's much more subdued, especially in court, than he's been. I think Donnie's a little fearful of that hammer hanging over his head.
I don't know if he's fearful, um, or not, but I know Judge Marchand says he's gonna hold this all over, or he's gonna reserve his judgment. I wonder if he wasn't waiting to see if just the threat of judgment was going to change Donnie's behavior before he made an ultimate decision. Like he said, like he thought, well, I'll fight him, but I'm gonna give him a week before I release my decision. If he cuts back and tones it down, I'll keep it to a fine. But if he keeps it up, then I'm gonna bring the hammer down or something. Maybe that's what he was thinking. I don't know. I know there's another hearing about the gag order on Thursday
That's for the
before
new
court.
violations. That's for the new
For the,
violations.
right. But I think we're gonna have his decision, whatever it is, before um that that new hearing.
Well,
It's just a gut feeling of mine. I don't think Judge Marchand's going to have two decisions on this gag order holding out over Donald Trump's head. I think he's going to come out with something. It's probably going to be a low fine, and then whatever this one is going to be in. I think he's going to bring the hammer down on Donald Trump the second time and say, "Look, you had the thing holding out over your head. You know, I hadn't given you a decision."
well,
And maybe he brings the hammer down with the second one.
that's an interesting angle because the thought process on it is that he's only going to give them the fines, but it's the next one after he violates it, after being found guilty of violating the gag order. It's the second one that will bring the hammer down really fast. So that's interesting that they're having a hearing on Thursday. It would be hilarious if on Wednesday he comes out and says, we're going to fine you $10,000 for the 10 violations. Then Thursday comes and he finds him guilty there, and then does whatever seriously needs to be done, put him in jail for 2 days or whatever. That's interesting. I never thought about that. He's not going to do this and give him a second chance. He's already had the second chance, and there's no way out of it at this point because he's already violated after the hearing. He did it immediately after the hearing.
Right. And I don't think Judge Marchand is going to hold, have two reserved judgments out there over Donald Trump's head. So I think we're going to get the first decision probably Wednesday, and then Thursday he's going to go in and out. I don't know if he's going to bring the hammer down or if he's going to reserve that judgment for a few days or what. But he could really easily hit him with a couple of days, and Joe goes, look, we held the other warning. I told you there was going to be consequences while I thought this first one through. And we know the Secret Service has been in talks with jail staff and things like that, trying to figure out how holding Donald Trump would work. And then I know you talked about it from Glenn Kirshner about how if he's held in contempt, that's a crime. And now he's in violation of his bail in all 4 districts.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up,
including New York.
I was going to bring that up, and I hadn't thought about that until I had heard Glenn Kirshner talk about it. The funny thing is you don't hear anybody else talking about it, but Glenn knows his shit, and there are rules to being out on bail. I think that's what people forget. Donald Trump is essentially out on bail in those 3 criminal trials. If he didn't have bail or some kind of agreement, he'd be sitting in jail for each of those crimes. He's out, but he has restrictions and he has rules he has to follow. And you're right. If he commits a crime and contempt of court is a crime, he's in violation in all those criminal trials.
Exactly. And something I was just thinking of, I don't remember how much his bail was in each of those appearances, but we already know he's got money held up for E. Jean Carroll. He's got the money held up for his civil fraud. He's got, and now you got the bond money. If he is held in violation of his bond or his bail, whatever he put up, that money's gone.
Yeah, it's gone.
You only get it you only get that back if you meet all of the requirements of your bond or your bail or whatever they give you. And if you don't do it, they can take all that money and you don't get it back.
Right.
So, he's not thinking about it, but this could fuck him over financially almost as bad as having to put up the cash bond for the civil fraud case.
Right. Well, I know there's at least one of the cases where he didn't put up any money and nobody understood why he didn't have to put up any money unless they released him on his own recognizance, which is a fucking joke. But there's a lot that could go wrong with this contempt of court thing. And in the last few days, Donald Trump seems to have toned it down a little bit, but I think it's a little too late. He's already violated the gag order after the hearing, immediately after the hearing. I mean, within minutes after the hearing, he violated again on Truth Social. So his violations are legit. The second hearing, he's going to be found guilty of it too, because he fucking did it. And he did it on a national level on fucking in the media or social media. And it's not hard to prove.
Yeah. And, he comes out, he talks about the gag order. Well, I'm not allowed to speak as he's actively speaking and walking right through the gag order that he's told he's not allowed to do. And on top of it, he doesn't understand that these gag order restrictions, all this really is an official reminder from the judge that you are a defendant in this case. You can't do these things. If I was on trial for any crime, I would have the same restrictions.
Right.
This isn't new. All the gag order is an official document reminder saying, hey, you know what? We had to sit you down and remind you that these are the things defendants can't do. And if he had a decent attorney who could control him, he would already know this. But his attorneys just practice law by following whatever Donnie says.
Well, and what people have to understand is in these three other trials where he's essentially out on bail, contempt of court is a crime, and that breaks a rule in each one of those release programs that he has with those criminal trials, the bond that he has set up. He has to fall in line with all those rules. The minute he breaks one of those rules, the resolution by the court is to put you in jail up until the time the court goes to trial. And wouldn't that be ironic? I doubt they'll do that. But the fact of the matter is if say DC has him out on bond and he breaks a rule, Judge Shutkins can say you broke the terms of your bond. You're now going to sit in jail till the time we go to court. So let's keep trying to delay this motherfucker. That will speed things up.
Oh, yeah. And I know she wouldn't do it, but it would be ironic if the one decision Aileen Cannon gets right is to hold him in violation of bail. He gets held in Florida.
Yeah.
At the one where she's agreed to basically put it off indefinitely, and she keeps playing his game of putting it off. That would be hilarious, but she won't hold him. It's either going to be New York's either going to hold him in violation of his bail. It's going to be DC, or it might be Georgia.
Yeah, it could be Georgia. There's enough, we're talking about the delays and people all worried about DC and Florida and Georgia being delayed till after the election. And I've said this on TikTok and on the podcast. I'm wondering if you concur. I don't really care if they're delayed till after the election, because I think what needs to be done to Donald Trump pre-election is going to be done in the Manhattan district. He needs to be convicted of multiple felony charges, and I believe he will. I don't think there's any way out for him. Whether he's got 20 criminal charges or 50 criminal charges, it doesn't really make a difference. It's going to have all the same impact. The only thing that those other trials will give out is more evidence that people need to know and will have some bearing on their perception of Donald Trump. But I think the perception of Donald Trump is going down the toilet anyway. And if Donald Trump asks to have these wait till after the election, he will most certainly lose the election. And then all of a sudden, he's not nearly as protected when Florida, Georgia, or DC goes to court. He'll be destroyed by then. Nobody will pay attention to him. Nobody will save him, and he'll just get fucking buried.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. I didn't necessarily care which case happened before the election. I knew one of them would bury him, like you said. However, I think I would have preferred it to have been the DC case, because
Oh,
I think
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
more important. Fewer charges, more important. I think more people would have walked away from him if he got convicted on those charges than the Manhattan one. But I think you're right. He gets most of these charges convicted. He's done. Saw a poll the other day, and I know we don't like polls, but it said 25% of Republicans are walking away from Donald Trump if he gets convicted of a crime. They would not vote for him. Donald Trump can't lose any Republican voters. He needs to gain voters. There aren't enough Republicans by themselves to win an election.
Right. Well, and if you look at the last primary, where I can't even remember where it was, but Donald Trump got 84% of the vote and Nikki Haley got 15% of the vote, and she's not even on the fucking ballot anymore. So it's conceivable to say that there's maybe 10 or 15%, maybe more than that, have already walked away from Donald Trump. If a Republican hopes to win an election, he needs independents, and the independents have walked away from him. If another 25% walks away from him, he's got maybe 50%, 55% of the Republican Party, and that's just not enough to even make a good showing in an election.
Exactly. And he's not going to, as this trial gets deeper, I expect that number to grow.
Absolutely.
The more that keeps coming out. I mean, like some of this stuff, the way he's lying about it is so ridiculous. Wasn't Stormy Daniels on the Celebrity Apprentice, or I know she interviewed for the Celebrity Apprentice or something.
Yeah, well, that's where one of his lies came out, and one of the things that he's going to have problems with. He said he didn't have an affair with Stormy Daniels. He didn't even know who Stormy Daniels was. Yet there's some pictures of them together. But more importantly, this Rona Graff, his personal assistant, who's worked with him for 35 years, said, "Oh yeah, she'd been in Trump Tower, and she was in Donald Trump's Rolodex, and she met with Donald Trump. So she pretty much shit canned all of Donald Trump's lies." Now, one of the things he was talking about was, yeah, maybe I'll put you on the Celebrity Apprentice, which was a lie, a con job. How do you explain putting a porn star that only people who watch porn know who she is, put her on Celebrity Apprentice? How do you fucking do that? He was just scamming her.
Yeah, but that's who Donald Trump is. Everything about him is a scam. Everything about him's a grift. Everything about him's fake. I mean, it's ridiculous. And people have bought into it for so long, I don't understand it. But his credibility's tanked as this case gets deeper. It's going to come out more and more is coming out. His popularity is going to decrease. There's no path for him to win the election. None. I mean,
No, there's no
the
path.
only
I don't care what
chance
anybody says.
the only chance he would have is if something were to happen to both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and we had to run. The Democrats had to scramble to find somebody, deep into the election cycle or something. Like, even if something happened to Joe Biden, we had to run Kamala. I think even Kamala against Donald Trump, Kamala Harris would win. As
I
long as
think
one of those two is on the ticket, Donald Trump has no chance.
I think any Democrat beats Donald Trump. I think as much as I question whether or not he'll be the nominee, I hope he is the nominee because that's the easiest route. They win no matter what because they don't really have a very deep bench over on the Republican Party. They have other fucked up humans like Donald Trump, maybe not quite as out there, but some worse. But uh, it's conceivable when you got a guy that's 77 going to be 78 and a guy that's 82. It's conceivable something could fucking happen. Um, and whether it's Joe Biden or Kamala, uh, you could go in there and you could find virtually anybody. Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, um, Jamie Raskin, Adam Schiff. Any one of those fuckers could beat uh, any Republican they bring up because the Republicans as a
Gavin
party have
Newsom.
been Gavin Newsom, yeah, but the Republican Party, more than Donald Trump being destroyed, the entire Republican Party is destroyed at this point. They're not unified. They can't win anything because they can't agree on anything amongst themselves.
No, they can't. And we've talked about it several times. That bench for the Republicans as a national candidate is so shallow because they put all of their eggs in the basket of Donald Trump. They have
Right.
not been building anybody up on a national level in the last 4 years. Everybody's been coming out kowtowing to Donald Trump, saying the election was stolen, Trump should still be president, stroking his ego, and everything else. And if they had spent some time building some people up on the national stage, they could have had a deep bench enough that they could have maybe ran somebody besides Donald Trump,
Right.
and he'd have been an afterthought. And if they would have had somebody strong in the RNC when he tried to announce his candidacy, they could have just told him no.
Well, that's what they should have done, but
And
Donald Trump won't allow it. His ego won't allow it. There can't be anybody even close to him.
No, they can't, there can't be. That, that's why he was so hell bent on getting Nikki Haley out of the race. And then he still wants her to come down and endorse him and kiss the ring.
Yeah.
And she's not going to do it
She'd be stupid if she did, because
because
it would
he
ruin her
has to be.
career.
I mean, her career is already ruined, but
Yeah.
because she was tied to Donald Trump. Anybody who was in his administration, I don't think they have any legitimacy anymore. The American voters are getting younger as the silent generation and baby boomers are dying out, and the younger generations are coming up. They know, they see through all the bullshit, and they don't fall into the same culture wars and the news wars that the older generations did.
No.
Um, I think they are more in tune with what's going on, and they're going to look at it and go, "Oh, you were part of the Trump administration. I don't care what you're doing now. You're still guilty."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's going to be the stench of Donald Trump will hang on these people forever. They've waited too long to step away from him. They're in for the full the full Monty, as it will, and they're going to have trouble after it's after it's all said and done. I know that paints a horrible picture if you saw the movie, but um, you know, I've said all along, I'm concerned about Donald Trump ever making it to the nomination because I think with all the pressure and all the troubles hanging over his head, a guy who's emotionally fragile, physically not in the best shape, I just see at some point the pressure becoming so bad and the constant bad news hitting him in the head, it's going to crush him emotionally or physically or both. My only hope is if that happens, that he stays the nominee as long as possible. The shorter amount of time the Republicans have to replace him, the worse it's going to be for the Republicans. The worst possible case, Donald Trump is the nominee. I think people are afraid of that, and I hope for it because I think Donald Trump gets his ass kicked easily. But if not him, I hope they only have a month to find a fucking candidate.
Yeah, I mean, odds are if it gets that deep, it'll be whoever, whatever fucked up individual he picks. And like I said earlier, he's got to have some sort of a toady.
Yeah,
So whoever it is isn't going to be a strong candidate. It's not going to be, you know, I hate to say it, but DeSantis is kind of a strong personality, even though he's robotic and he's this and he's that. If he was the vice presidential candidate and something happened to Donald Trump, DeSantis has enough personality that he could step up and run the rest of the campaign
right.
on his own. But that's not the type of person Donald Trump wants. Donald Trump wants somebody who's going to sit back, be kind of weak. Well, I'm going to go along with whatever the president decides type person. And then when that person gets elevated to president, if they don't have any sort of a backbone of their own, they're not going to land with the independent voters, and might not even land with the Republican voters that have already walked away from Donald Trump.
Right, right. Well, he's going to want somebody like Mike Pence, somebody you've never heard of, somebody that has, like you say, no spine, and somebody who's just going to do what they're told, and that's who it's going to be, or somebody that can bring money to the table or what have you. But I wonder if Donald Trump will ever get the opportunity to pick a vice presidential candidate because I think he's he's struggling right now. You can just see it in his face and the way he's talking and how he's not very clear when he talks. This is hitting him hard and it's going to go downhill very quickly. At least that's what his niece, the psychologist or psychiatrist, Mary, has said. He's going downhill fast right now. And I trust what she says. She knows him and she knows psychiatry.
Yeah, and um, the deeper this trial gets, it's only going to get worse. I mean, look at how his hit back for the correspondence dinner.
Yeah.
That was about as lame as it gets. Oh, it was just a bad showing. It was bad.
I said that on my TikTok. I said I was disappointed because Donald Trump always says, if you hit me, I'll hit you back 10 times harder. Well, he didn't do shit. Yeah, it sucked. It was bad. Colin Jost is weak. Well, that wasn't even
That,
that isn't up to Donald Trump's standards. That's lame, and that tells me something about where
no.
Donald Trump's head is.
And if it wasn't for the trial, and I know Donald Trump has to sit there through this trial and stuff, but pre-trial Donald Trump, before this started, he would have been out trying to hold an event. He would have tried to hold a rally during the correspondence dinner. He would have tried to call into Fox News or something to get his thing out there. And he just sat there in Mar-a-Lago tweeting away or truth socialing away the little bit he did. He is not who he used to be.
No,
And
no.
I know it's killing him that the attention's not on him, but it's just showing how weak he's really getting.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we can talk about it after we get back from the break about his mental state and his campaigning because it's obviously impacting that. Tell you what, we will take a quick break and we will be right back. We're back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Eric from Iowa is on the show today. We're talking about a number of things, and I want to get to Donald Trump's emotional condition as we speak. But before I do that, I think we have to note if you ever watch Eric on the show, his dog Cecilia oftentimes jumps up on him. Great dog, loving dog. She's awesome. And if she wants to come and interrupt the show, she's more than fucking welcome. But I think it's appropriate that Cecilia come in because she had something to say um, off camera. Of course, she said that Christy Nome sucks dog shit. I just wanted to get that out there.
Yes, I think she would agree. Yes.
She would agree. She said
Oh,
that, and she doesn't normally talk that kind of language, but you can understand her dismay after hearing that Christy Nome is proud of
yes.
shooting a puppy because it's untrainable. You know, one of the things I did in the TikTok about that, you know, it's one thing to do that and then say you did it and then double down and be proud of it. But I think it exposes not only Christy Nome, but the Republicans in general as far as their character. You know, a dog, I like all dogs better than most people. I think they're the essence of love and loyalty and God, how could anybody do anything badly to a dog? Um, but a dog is vulnerable. They kind of count on you to take care of them and be concerned for them. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have the ability to do that, why should we believe that you have the ability to do that to your constituents? I mean, there's has to be certain amount of compassion by a politician because you have people that have needs and problems that you're supposed to be fixing. And I mean, I think a perfect example of their lack of character and lack of compassion is the Roe v. Wade situation. It's real easy to say I'm against abortion or I'm for abortion. That's one thing. But when we have Old Soul on here and you hear these stories of women suffering and struggling and even dying because of the decisions made by Republicans, it's pretty clear they have no compassion. They don't care about anybody that might be vulnerable. And to me, that's the main thing any fucking politician should have is compassion. You're there to help.
Exactly. And I think even that story, South Dakota's kind of a red state, pretty red, pretty reliably red. And I'm not going to go out and say that, well, a Democrat could win South Dakota. I don't think so. But I think the next time she's up for reelection, I think she could easily get primaried out in her own state by another Republican just running on that story because people like dogs. And it's like you said, it shows compassion, and they might not have compassion for everybody with the Roe v. Wade thing. I know that they have, they're homophobic, they're transphobic, and everything. But at the end of the day, even conservatives like dogs. Most conservatives like dogs. Most people like dogs or
Yeah.
pets or something.
Yeah.
And it's the dumbest thing to be in support of. Um, and yeah, as far as the Roe v. Wade thing, we're Old Soul tells a great story every time she's on about the dangers of this ban. And did you see Mitch McConnell came out and said, well, we're not going to get to a national ban this term. The votes just aren't there in the Senate. We can't get to 60. It's
Right.
going to have to be a states thing. Well, that's just a dumb thing. Like, why come out and say anything at all? Every time you talk about it, it's a loser. It just keeps it back in the narrative and it pisses more people off.
I mean, if anybody knows anything, Mitch McConnell's smart enough to know that as long as they're embracing Roe v. Wade, they can't win the election. Not Donald Trump, not any fucking candidate. Nikki Haley, if she's against abortion and wants nationalized abortion, she couldn't get elected. And then, of course, all the down ballot people get affected by Roe v. Wade. I mean, Arizona is a good example with the shit they're going through. Donald Trump can't get elected in Arizona given what's going on. And Donald Trump has said, send it back to the states. And I'm the one that overturned Roe v. Wade. He's lost Arizona by doing what he's doing, but he's also lost it for the legislature too. And hopefully that happens. You get those Republicans the fuck out of there and we don't have this problem anymore.
Exactly. And it, like you said, it's about compassion. And I think people are realizing how much healthcare is tied to abortion care. And it's more than just even that. It's the simple fact that, you know, you hear stories after Roe was overturned. I've seen a lot of TikToks about from different women saying the issues they're having getting you know, like permanent contraceptive done, you know, tubes
Right.
tied, things like that, where the doctors are refusing to proceed do it because they're too young, they're not married, or blah blah, whatever the reason. And they're going, well, fuck, can't can't get the procedure if I need it to save my life later because you guys fucked that up. Now you're telling me I can't prevent the pregnancy. What the fuck am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
They can't win on this issue. Republicans can't win on the overturning of Roe. It is the biggest losing issue they have ever backed.
Oh, no question.
Now that it's happened.
It is a disaster for the Republican Party. And I think people forget that when they come to me and they say, oh, Donald Trump could win or the Republicans can win, there's a lot of things working against Donald Trump and the Republicans. But that one issue, Roe v. Wade, that is the decimation of the Republican Party. Never have they got on board with something that's been so hated nationwide. Literally 75% of the people support Roe v. Wade. So please tell me how a motherfucker finds a route to win if he supports and says he accomplished overturning Roe v. Wade. That just makes no mathematical sense.
It doesn't, but then you go back to some of the Trump fucks that I get coming to my page and they're talking, you know, oh, you know, it was so much better under Joe Biden, or under Donald Trump than Joe Biden. Yeah, you know, gas prices were cheap, grocery prices were cheap. Like the president can set those things. They look at so many small things, they think they can still win on those small issues. But that big issue alone is going to be the big thing that kills any Republican candidate. They can't win. I think we're going to see the biggest blue wave we have seen in a long time.
I do too.
I mean, we're going to hold the Senate. I don't, no doubt, it's going to be tough mathematically because the Democrats are defending more seats. But I think they do. I think they hold the Senate. It's going to be about where it is 50, 51, 52, nothing huge. But I think they gain the House, and I think they get the House by 20, 30 seats.
Yeah,
Easy.
yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think that's probably going to be the case. I mean, hell, 40 of them are fucking retiring. 40 Republicans are
Yeah.
retiring. So that's going to take a hit. Anyway, I, I, I look at, we were talking about the trial before, and I want to get back to that just real briefly because we were talking about Donald Trump's emotional state, and we were talking about Mary Trump, who's his niece and is a psychiatrist and is seeing some signs of his demise or his descent from where he was. He's certainly not the same um, candidate he was in 2020, and definitely not the same candidate he was in 2016. He's not as strong. He doesn't have as much support. But I've been hearing some things about Donald Trump, and you don't know if it's true or not, but the claims it's coming from insiders that they're having a tough time getting Donald Trump hyped up to campaign. And that's not surprising. If you're in court every day and you're on a criminal trial with 34 charges, people fucking with your money, you got to put $275 million in a bank account that you can't touch and you're short on money anyway. Like I've always said, that can take a toll on one's emotional state. And it clearly is, especially if he's getting tired of even going out. I mean, I'm sure he thinks to himself, what's the point? It's not going to do me any good. He'd be right. He's not going to say that outwardly, but you know he's thinking it.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if his brain would even let him think that there's no point. Um, but clearly he's got less enthusiasm, whether it's the money or whether it's then you say no, you can't come or whatever. He's barely rallying. He's not doing much in the way of fundraising anywhere. He's not campaigning, not really, other than his little tidbits, during breaks and stuff.
Yeah,
And
true
when
social.
he had 3 days.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, he had 3 days. He had Saturday, Sunday, Monday, no court. Where'd he go? I think he went home to Mar-a-Lago. And there he sat in his dirty diaper and didn't do a thing. He could have gone somewhere. He could have held a small rally. He could have, but I don't think he's getting the crowds he used to.
He's not getting the crowds
He's
he
not
used to.
drawing the people.
He doesn't have the money to do it.
I don't.
Nobody's going to extend credit to him because he owes everybody money in all the towns he would go to. He's just in a bad way. I personally, I think when he goes home, he's just sitting there pouting like a little bitch because that's what that's what a narcissist
Yeah,
would do. They are children, and when they don't get their way, they either lose their shit or they pout or they run away. So he's at the pouting stage now.
yeah. Well, speaking of fundraising, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier in the show or not. Did you hear about the Formula One thing?
No, you were telling me about it before we went on. Please repeat that because that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Now I heard this from, I think it was Ring of Fire on TikTok, and I saw it in the Washington Post, and I saw a couple other newspapers I had never heard of were picking it up, but so a lot of the mainstream stories weren't picking it up. Apparently next month there is a Formula One event in Miami, according to at least what I'm hearing. And Donald Trump has a box, and apparently he was sending out fundraising letters saying, come to my box for this Formula One event, and kind of in the way he phrased it made it sound like he was being sponsored by Formula One.
Yeah.
And he wanted $250,000 a ticket. Well, they sent him a cease and desist and said, no, you are not using our box for a campaign event. You can't sell tickets like that. We do not endorse you. And basically, if you keep it up, you won't have your box for this event. And you can bring whoever you want, basically, but if we find out you're doing it for campaign donations, it ain't happening.
Wow. Who would have ever thought Donald Trump would try something like this? That's that's
Oh yeah,
scurrilous.
completely out of character.
Yeah, yeah,
Completely out of character.
he's above
But
board.
I just thought that was interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, not a lot of the major news networks are covering it, so I'm not sure, how much of it is legit. But the fact that I was able to find it somewhere else besides Ring of Fire kind of gave it some legitimacy, at least in my mind.
Yeah. No question. It just shows the desperation Donald Trump has for gaining money. He's trying to sell Bibles. He's trying to sell NFTs that are a fucking joke. He's trying to somehow associate himself with Formula One, even though he's not associated, and try to make money off the deal. I mean, these are the types of things that Donald Trump has done for years and gotten away with because he's Donald Trump. And this is what's so confusing to him. He's not getting away with it anymore. Shit, I could do that all the time, but people are tired of the bullshit and people don't want to be associated with him. He's going to have to learn this. It's not going to go well because all these people that gave him sway just aren't willing to do it anymore because it'll be damaging to their own fucking brand.
Exactly that. And it's just the thing where he is such a polarizing figure now. You know, when he was just Donald Trump businessman, before he ever ran for the presidency, before he came down the golden escalator, people put up with a lot because he was an oddity. He was kind of an attraction a little bit. He'd show up, you know, but then once he ran for president, every day he became more and more polarizing. And as you said, it's damaging to their brand to be associated with him, or the types of people that he's associated with aren't the type they want to draw anymore. Whereas before he ever ran for president, he kind of draw some people from every walk of life.
Right.
You
Right.
know, I'm not going to say I was a Donald Trump fan, and I wouldn't have gone out of my way to meet him before he ran for the presidency, but I didn't hate the man back
No,
then.
no,
Like I didn't
there was,
absolutely hate him like I do now.
right. Well, you know,
I knew who he was. I didn't care necessarily, but it wasn't this pure hatred that he's brought out of a lot of people.
Donald Trump is known for suggesting that his brand is intrinsically valuable. You can't even put a price on his brand. But the thing about it is his brand is taking a shit. A lot of people are running away from his brand. I think I talked about it yesterday, but there was a story out about some writer who went into Trump Tower, and they go into Trump Tower. They had this big, huge waterfall, a focal point that they always were proud of. No water running down. All the retail stores are empty. Nobody in the fucking building. And I think anything with Trump's name on it is going to experience this because being associated by Trump with Trump, even by going in his buildings, is going to become harmful to one's own brand or their image. And Donald Trump's brand is
Oh
taking
yeah,
a huge fucking hit. Nobody wants to be associated with Donald Trump. Not even the people that like him want to be associated because they know 70% of the country hate the motherfucker.
exactly. And it's his brand has become so toxic. I mean, if his brand was intrinsically valuable, you would have seen his truth stock social stock take off and continuing an upward trajectory. Now it's had a couple of days of rebound, but it's tanked and it's only going to get worse.
You know,
It's not valuable just by his name alone.
I see Donald Trump's brand going the same way of a brand that was popular in the 80s. I don't know, when were you born? You wouldn't know this. You wouldn't recognize it.
83.
83. It was about that time, maybe a little bit earlier. I was working for a radio station in Minneapolis in 1980, 81, and I was running the board for some talk shows and stuff, and I would have to play commercials. And there was one commercial I played more than any other commercial, and it was a little chocolate piece of candy that allowed you to lose weight. Now, back in those days, it just did something to your appetite, and you take these little chocolate candies and you would lose weight, or at least that's what they claimed. Now, the name of that candy quickly sank that brand within months. It just went away, never to be seen again. And you know what the name of that candies was? And think about the year, early 80s. It
What?
was called AIDS, AIDS, AIDS. Lose weight on AIDS. And then, of course, we get the pandemic or the epidemic of AIDS throughout the country. And that motherfucker went by the wayside. And that's where I see Donald Trump's brand going. It's going to become more toxic and it's going to be, he and the brand are going to be a pariah and nobody's going to want to get near it.
Yeah, I think you're right. That reminds me of something I saw at my local McDonald's just today. Couldn't remember if it was today or yesterday, but it was today. A couple of older people were talking about politics, and they didn't refer to either person by name. They didn't
Really?
refer to Joe Biden. They didn't refer to Donald Trump. They just said person A and person B. Like they didn't want to talk about either one by name.
Wow.
And I only overheard a couple sentences of the conversation. Didn't I wasn't close enough to them to get the whole thing, but they were speaking kind of loud, which is why I picked up on it. So I don't know which way they were leaning or whatever, but didn't seem like they were too thrilled with either one, and they couldn't even bring up to Donald Trump to mention him by name.
Wow. Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of that. I was reading some emails from some people, and I can't remember where they were. They were in a hotbed of, maybe it was Florida or maybe it was a southern state, but they were trying to decide how Donald Trump is doing. And they would go through areas of the state near their homes, and they would see Trump signs all over the place, flags and Trump signs. And they said, now when you go through that area, you might see one Trump sign here or one Trump sign there. And it really might be indicative of Donald Trump's support. I think the people that really supported him are getting tired of getting their ass kicked by normal people that are willing to argue with him about it. They're finding it hard to argue for Donald Trump when he keeps implicating himself and evidence comes out that he's actually a criminal. They're finding it hard to fight for this guy anymore.
Yeah, I've seen that around me too. I'm still in a red county, red town, but just driving around town, the little bit I do, and it's a small town, but I don't go a lot of places. Um, and I'm noticing it's about 50-50 for yard signs right now.
Really?
Trump and Biden.
That's saying something in a red area. That's saying a lot.
And the one I noticed, this guy's got little itty bitty Trump sign. I don't know, maybe 2x4, 2 feet by 4, maybe a foot and a half by 3. I'm not sure. And then like his next door neighbor, less than about 3 feet away from him, has got this huge sign for Biden Harris, like 4 times the size. It's got, it's encased with a wooden frame, like it's really well done. And it's just like, I think that's indicative of, the campaign, as you talked about on your TikToks. Joe Biden's out fundraising at every level. And I'm sure
Yeah.
the sign was homemade as far as the frame and everything. But Joe Biden is just, dwarfing
Yeah.
Donald Trump in every aspect.
Well,
I think that's just the way it's going to be.
well, that's one thing I talked about on TikTok, and I've talked about this before. Everybody's worried about the polls. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are neck and neck, or Donald Trump is beating them. But it's impossible to really take that seriously. We don't know who's funding the polls. We don't know the questions they're asking. We don't know who they're asking. We don't know what they're doing with the data once they compile it. I mean, the whole situation seems sketchy. We know that in 2022, the polls were wrong. We know that in 2016, the polls were wrong. So why do you put so much trust in it? And I went to what you were talking about. The real indication as to support has to be through fundraising, because these people have to go into their pockets, take their hard earned money, and hand it to a candidate. If that isn't the essence of support, the definition of support, I don't know what the fuck is. And then you've got Joe Biden out fundraising Donald Trump by double. I mean, it's not even close. Now, you would think if it was close in terms of support, Donald Trump would have just as much as Joe Biden, but that's not the case. So please explain to me what support really is.
Well, I think you're right, but I'm also going to throw one small caveat in there. And that I think part of the reason Donald Trump isn't fundraising the way he could has a lot to do with how he's spending money.
Right.
They give him a donation, there's no guarantee it's going to go to the election.
No, definitely not.
It goes to run his businesses. He puts it in his legal fees. He uses it to pay his bond or what have you.
And these financial problems are trickling down to the rest of the Republican Party. We know that when Laura Trump took over at the RNC, that there were many people said, I'm not giving the RNC any money because I know where it's going. It's going in Donald Trump's pocket or his lawyer's pockets. So the RNC is having a tougher time fundraising as well. One Trumper came to my page and said, I think you're wrong there. You need to do your research. Don't you remember? Donald Trump had that record breaking fundraising event where he got $50 million. And I said on the TikTok, I said, I feel like a dad telling his kid that Santa isn't real, but for the Trump-fucks, I'll just say this to you. Now hold on. Donald Trump fucking lied to you. And they admitted they lied to you. He didn't collect $50 million. He got some promises of money. But let's be honest, if I'm going to get a promise from somebody, I hope it's not a fucking Republican. And if Donald Trump gets convicted of any crime, how many of those people you think they're going to come through on their promises? This was something Donald Trump just cooked up to fight against Joe Biden actually getting 25 million and breaking a record, and he wanted to beat him. It was all about perception, not about substance, which is everything that Donald Trump does.
And that was the last big fundraiser Donald Trump had.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden's continuing to raise money. I mean, I talked about it. I think I emailed you. I don't remember if we talked about it last time I was on, but there was that story where Donald Trump said, well, if you use my name and likeness and stuff in your,
Yeah.
in your campaign to help get reelected, give me 5% off the top. You got to tithe to the big man. And yet that's what they want to accuse Joe Biden of.
Yeah.
They want to accuse Joe Biden of getting money out from Hunter for, well, you got to get a cut to the big man. No, that's Donald Trump all the way. He's doing it. And you're running stories about it, and they don't want to see it. But I got somebody similar came to my page about the 50 million, and that 50 million was nothing but worthless IOUs.
Right. And we don't even know if it was 50 million worth of IOUs. They lied about it initially. They're lying about everything.
Well, I mean, I would believe that I could believe it was $50 million worth of IOUs. No doubt in my mind that it could be $50 million worth of IOUs. But I don't believe they were sincere IOUs.
No.
That,
No.
oh yeah, well, if you beat or when you beat your court case in Manhattan, we'll donate to your campaign.
Right.
You get out of that, we'll donate, or something like that. Something they knew, that some number they knew or whatever that they figured they could get away with, that Donald Trump wouldn't hit, but his ego would say, oh yeah, I can do that.
Well, and we know that anybody around Donald Trump will just tell him whatever he needs to hear. And you pointed that out with all these news stories that they had printed up for him to keep his mind positive. We got to give him the positive stuff so he doesn't lose his shit. And, that's been the case. That's why these lawyers do his bidding and do what they tell him, because they just want to keep him happy, in spite of the fact that it's killing his fucking cases. He doesn't really have very good representation because the representatives are doing whatever he tells them, and he doesn't know fuck all about the law, clearly.
No, he doesn't know fuck all. I mean, it's ridiculous. And that's why I know you did the TikTok earlier today talking about Hunter Biden going after Fox News, and he got a good lawyer.
Yeah.
And he's going after him to get him to stop, and he's probably going to get a big payday out of this. And that's the difference between Donald Trump and Hunter Biden, or most people. Hunter Biden probably went to this guy. What was it? What's his name?
His name is Garagos or Garagos. He was Michael Jackson's lawyer, and he's been a big lawyer for a lot of big name people.
Yeah. But he probably went to this guy and said, look, here's everything I've got that they've been doing. Do we have a case? The guy went, yeah, we do. And he goes, okay, you take it from here, do whatever you have to, handle it, and then step back and let his attorney deal with it. And Donald Trump can't do that, because the things that Donald Trump, that could benefit Donald Trump, might make him look weak or incompetent or foolish or something. and his ego won't let him do it. So he's got to tell his attorneys what to do to make sure they always paint him in the best light,
Right.
or what he perceives as the best light.
Right. And it's not always the best legal choice. You know, the funny thing about with the Trumplefuck, when I made the comment about Garagos or Garag, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It doesn't matter. He's a big time lawyer in LA. But he came to my page and he says, "Oh, you don't think Fox has good lawyers too?" I said, "I don't know if Fox has good lawyers or not, but here's what I know about the lawyers. The last defamation lawsuit, they settled out of court for $800 million. So I'm wondering if they're that fucking good. They didn't win that case. They admitted guilt and they paid him nearly $1 billion. So if that's your example of a good lawyer, I think I'll go with whoever Hunter's got."
Well, the thing is, most of the Trump fucks probably never heard that story. They probably never knew that Fox settled
No,
because it wasn't part
true.
of the um they didn't cover it. And I think that's where Dominion screwed up. Um, I think settling with them was fine, but there should have been something in the agreement where they had to go out publicly on air for as many minutes as they talked negatively about Dominion. They should have had to go back, put that many minutes of retraction out there, and admitted to this story and everything, and told the Trumplefucks the truth.
Right.
But instead, they get to settle it and kick it under the rug and go, "Oh, never happened," and then just never talk about it again. As long as they don't talk about Dominion, Dominion leaves them alone. And I think that's where Dominion screwed up.
Right. You know, there's one person that was prominent in politics for the bulk of what we've been doing with Donald Trump during his tenure and afterwards. We haven't talked about her much, but she's been an important figure in the Democratic Party for a long time, and that's Nancy Pelosi. We haven't talked about her because she's no longer Speaker of the House. She stepped down. Hakeem Jeffries will be Speaker of the House once the Democrats take control of the House. But I heard an interesting story, and it kind of illustrates what I've said about the left side media, how they are better than Fox, but they got some issues too. So Nancy Pelosi is being interviewed by Katie Tour, who I actually like. I watch her and she does a pretty good job. But Nancy Pelosi is promoting the fact that Joe Biden got 17 million jobs, created 17 million jobs, and Donald Trump is the worst president in history to create jobs. In fact, he's the only president in history that left with fewer jobs than when he came in. Katie Tour, after she said that, Katie Tour responded, "Yeah, well, there was a global pandemic too," as if that was an excuse for him not adding jobs. And Nancy Pelosi looked at her. Keep in mind, this is MSNBC, a left side media, and she goes, "Well, if you want to be a Donald Trump apologist, that's up for you, but that's up to you. But I'm not in on that. I'm not doing that." And then Katie Tour was kind of shook up. "Well, I don't think
Right.
anybody would say that." And I said to myself, after you said what you just said, I would say that. And I get that kickback from people all the time. "Well, there's a global pandemic. It wasn't Donald Trump's fault." And I always remind them, I said, "Look, Donald Trump ignored the pandemic when it started. He was negligent. The fact that it got to the level that it did, that the shutdowns happened, that 1 million people died, was because of Donald Trump's negligence." So you can say it was a global pandemic and why he didn't have that many jobs, but the global pandemic wouldn't have been as bad in this country had Donald Trump done fucking anything. And he didn't do anything. So because he didn't do anything and because he was negligent, I say the loss in jobs hangs right on Donald Trump's back, because the reason it happened is because of his inability to do anything that a normal president would do when we came into a pandemic. And they don't like to hear that. "Well, Donald Trump got the vaccine." Yeah, toward the end of his term, and then he didn't have any way to distribute it. It took Joe Biden to get it out to the people.
And then the same ones that say, "Well, Donald Trump got the vaccine, refused to take it."
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, exactly.
but, but remember when Donald Trump became president, one of the first things he did is he threw out the pandemic response book.
Right.
You
And the
know,
committee. And the
uh,
committee. He fired
Barack,
him. No, he fired the whole
yeah,
committee.
Barack Obama had a committee. He had a committee, he had a response plan, he had everything. And Donald Trump fired the committee and goes, "Well, we don't pay doctors to sit around and do nothing. When there is a pandemic, we'll try to get somebody." And
Yeah.
then the pandemic happened, they didn't get anybody.
Yeah.
It just proves he's an ineffective businessman and he doesn't know fuck all about fuck all. If he would have followed the pandemic plan that Barack Obama put in place, it would have turned out fine. We had the resources there. But instead, he couldn't take the words of somebody else, especially not a black man
No,
that
God,
he
no.
has been running down for 8 years. Um, just couldn't do it. And it all lies at the feet of Donald Trump.
Well, this
I
is
don't I
part
don't doubt that one bit.
this is part and parcel to who Donald Trump is and who the Republicans are. And what I've said before is it's all about performance, it's all about perception, and nothing about substance. When that pandemic started, um, Donald Trump saw that as a problem in his upcoming election. And instead of doing something about it and maybe getting reelected, he decided to ignore it because he's not a guy that comes up with answers or fixes things. He's a guy that runs and hides and tries to bullshit and gaslight people. So he tried to convince people that, oh, there is no pandemic. It's a hoax. It's not a big deal. It'll go away in a few days. He was just trying to deny the obvious, and it didn't work. And that's why I'm so amazed by how he continues to do that. He he and the Republicans constantly try to gaslight people by telling them the opposite of what is true, and they think somehow that's going to work. You would think in a pandemic, when you tried to do that very same thing, a million people die, the country shuts down for a year or more, and the economy goes to shit. You would think they learned a lesson, but they're still doing it today on a smaller scale, of course, but they still are using the same fucking strategy.
Yeah, I know. I at the time when the pandemic happened and watching his response play out, and then after he lost in 2020, I made this analogy. I said the universe went to Donald Trump with a silver platter and goes,
Yeah,
"Here, Donald Trump, here's a new term. You have 4 more years." And Donald Trump looked at it, tossed it aside, and said, "I know better how to get 4 more years."
right.
It was gift wrapped for him, and he couldn't accept it and had to move, because the way it was going to happen didn't fit the image he wanted to portray. And it would have meant bowing down to doctors and letting other people know who know the fields they're responsible for do the things that they know how to do. And Donald Trump wouldn't, in his mind, wouldn't have looked like the big hero
Right. Right.
because
Exactly.
he let somebody else take the lead and do something. If he would, whereas if Joe Biden had been president during the pandemic, just as a hypothetical, he would have pulled out the pandemic response plan. He would have turned to the doctors and said, "Okay, how do we get out of it?" We would have probably been shut down for 2-3 weeks right off the bat. Okay, it's over. We're back up and running, and a month later, it's over and done with. And Joe Biden looks like a genius and a hero because he let the people who knew what they were dealing with do what they were supposed to do. But Donald
Exactly.
Trump will never understand that logic.
No, when Donald Trump had this handed to him on a silver platter, he said to himself, I can fuck this up. I can definitely fuck this up. And that's what he did. Can you imagine? Now, the
Yes.
pandemic was pretty bad. I mean, it was epically bad. Can you imagine with his mindset, his ability, his intellectual level? What if something like 9/11 happened or somebody attacked this country and he fucked that up, which he most certainly would have? I mean, the pandemic was horrific, but something worse could have happened. Thankfully, it didn't under Donald Trump's watch because it would have been a worldwide fucking mess. He would have sent bombers out to people he didn't even fucking know. It's terrifying to think, and to think that people want him back in that position to maybe fuck up again. And it just can't be allowed.
I think he would have responded to 9/11. He would have pushed the red button and launched nukes. I firmly think so. I
Yeah.
don't. He if it 9/11 happened under his watch, I think he would have sent nukes, and I think he would have been to the wrong people, but he would have set off a global nuclear uh strike. Us launching them, Russia launching them, everybody launching who has them launching them against somebody. I think all because he would have thought that made him look tough and
Right.
strong, and that would have been the appropriate response. He doesn't understand measured response. He doesn't understand nuance. And it wouldn't
Diplomacy.
matter what the generals came to him and said. Oh no, definitely not diplomacy. And it wouldn't have mattered what the generals came to him and said. What an appropriate response would have been. He would have looked at it and unless they really smooth talked him the right way, he would have thought that made him look like a loser and a sucker, and he would have done something 10 times worse.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the important thing that has to be said over and above everything else. And I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm not making a judgment. The facts are the facts. It's right in front of us. Donald Trump is a dumb man. He's not articulate. He's not smart. He's
Yes.
not good on his feet.
No.
Everything he does is emotion and reaction, and he always fucks up. And on top of it, he's not very bright. And that's a scary situation to have somebody running the country and a finger on the nuclear weapons. That's just frightening. And that's one of the main reasons why he can't be president again.
But I think that's why he is a draw to a bunch of the Trumplafucks, because he speaks at about a sixth to eighth grade level. He doesn't use very many words over two syllables, maybe a three syllable every now and then. But even on the three syllable words, he struggles.
Yeah,
He talks at their level,
true.
whereas Joe Biden, Barack Obama, they come out and they talk at a very highly educated level because they are.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they're using words that these people don't understand or can't pronounce or can't read. And I hate to kind of throw all the Trumplafucks under the bus, but it seems to be a generalization that fits.
Yeah.
Um, because I just think they talk, Democrats talk above the intelligence level of the Republicans generally, and that's why the Republicans hate them, is because they don't understand what's actually being said.
Now, people will say to me, well, yeah, there's educated people, wealthy people, successful people that follow Donald Trump. They're not dumb. I will tell you this. I've known plenty of people in my life that have big educations, that have made millions of dollars. And yes, they can be fucking dumb. I know some very well educated, wealthy, dumb motherfuckers. They exist and they're all over the place.
Oh yeah. I know several myself. Um, there's one good old boy I know from around here. I'll see him at casinos all the time, and he's got money. I think he does trucking or something, but he's got a lot of money. But Dahmer, no, box of rocks some days, because he'll sit there, keep throwing good money after bad. He'll be down $2,000-3,000 in a day
Yeah.
and go back to the ATM, get more money. But then the whole time he's losing the money he just got again from the ATM, he's bitching and complaining about losing the money and not, oh, well, I should have gone home. Well, if you know
Yeah.
you should have gone home, go home.
Go
You
home. Yeah.
know, oh, I
Exactly.
never win here. Why do I come here? But you keep making the dumb choice. Like it blows my mind. But he's wealthy and he does decent for himself outside of his gambling thing that I run into. And when he's winning, I don't mind talking to the guy. But if he's having a bad day, oh, he's something else to deal with. And it's like what you say, they're wealthy people that, are dumb.
That
Wealth doesn't mean intelligence by any means.
No, it does not. We're coming down toward the end here, and I wanted to bring this up and talk briefly about it. We know we had the final arguments with the claim of total presidential immunity by Donald Trump. And we know that the Supreme Court has listened to it, and we heard some of the things they say. And I get frustrated when I hear people go on the media or on the social media and they start saying, "Oh, I think those Supreme Court justices are going to give him immunity." And I just don't see how that's even possible. It's just not possible because of what it would create. And it doesn't just give Donald Trump immunity, it gives Joe Biden immunity, it gives every future president immunity. And that is contrary to anything that our democracy stands for. There's nothing that's, they always say, well, there's nothing about abortion in the Constitution. Well, there's nothing about immunity in the Constitution either. I think they're trying to play the game. They're trying to create the delay, but there's no way they give the guy immunity because it'll hurt everything, including themselves.
Yeah, I don't think the Supreme Court comes out and gives them immunity. I think what they'll do, if they do anything, they might create some kind of a test for, is this an official act or a private act of a citizen? Because you got to remember, even though he's a public, servant and he's an elected official, there are still things that you do as, the president that would still be considered personal or private and not part of being the president. And maybe they come up with some sort of a test that says, okay, well, this means he was doing it as the president. Yes, he's immune. If it's this, then no, it was for his own benefit, and that's no immunity. They might do that, and that's the extent of what I think they give him. And
Yeah.
that's best case scenario for Donald Trump.
Well, and the thing
And
about it,
nothing that he's been accused of should fall under official acts anyway. So it shouldn't matter.
well, they stipulated that in the hearing, they would the justices would ask, would this be an official or a private decision? And even his lawyer said, no, this would be private. And they were talking about all the things he's actually charged with. Um, I personally think when that session started and they were asked if a president could kill a rival or start a coup, and they said possibly, that's where they lost the Supreme Court, in spite of what the Supreme Court said. Even they, the most corrupt Supreme Court justice, can't cotton to that.
No. I think I don't think you're gonna get um a clean 9-0 no immunity decision though.
No, you're not. No.
I think I think it's gonna be 8-1, 7-2, maybe at the worst 6-3. I think minimum you're gonna see 8-1, and I think the one saying that yes, he would have immunity would be Clarence Thomas,
And
because
Alito.
it's been Alito maybe, but even I don't even think Alito's that dumb. I think Thomas is.
Well, I think
Um,
Thomas doesn't have anything to lose right now. The Democrats get control. He's fucked.
yeah. Um, but uh I think at best they're going to give him like that test. He is not going to get absolute immunity. That's nowhere anywhere has it ever been a thing. And in fact, it got brought up in that court case or in the oral arguments. We've talked about it. If presidential immunity was a thing, Richard Nixon wouldn't have needed a pardon.
Exactly. 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 And
You know,
the
it's
ironic
already been
thing,
answered.
when he was being impeached, his lawyers as much as said, well, you don't have to impeach him here because he'll be subject to the law when he's no longer president. And now those same lawyers are taking the other side. I mean, that's how credible these fucks are. They don't have any standing. They don't have any real opinions. They're just trying to game it whatever way they can for Donald Trump. And they'll say whatever they have to say at that given time.
Well, that's because they're following what Donald Trump tells them to do, because Donald Trump thinks he's some genius that knows everything about everything. And as we've talked about, he doesn't, but he thinks that this is going to be some kind of a winning argument. So he pushes that forward.
Right.
And then when, I don't know what he does when this fails, but he's not going to get immunity. Don't buy into the bullshit. The media is going to be pushing this story every now and then out until we get that decision that there is immunity there, because they need, like we've talked about, they need to keep you coming back. And
Right.
they're going to say, well, the Supreme Court hasn't come back on that immunity thing. They could give him full immunity yet. Just wait, just wait. But if you look at the facts of the case, what he's trying to argue, and the breadth of what could happen, there's no way the Supreme Court gives the president ultimate authority. It goes against everything our system is there for.
Well, and
The checks and the balances.
the other thing people say, well, they'll send it back to the lower court, back to Judge Chutkin. And I don't know that they would do that because there's a lot of egos on the Supreme Court. They want their stamp on it. They don't want to leave this by the wayside and give it to the lower court. And besides, I think Hawk on TikTok and some other people have pointed out that if they do send it back to the lower court, Judge Chutkin can say, well, let's run the whole fucking thing. Let's get all the witnesses and all the evidence and play it out right here before the trial. Donald Trump does not want that. He doesn't fucking want it because it's going to be embarrassing for him and it's going to taint the trial. So I don't see them sending it back to the lower court. Or
Well,
if
if
they
they
do,
do send it back, like you were saying, I was going to bring up what Hawk said, and what he was saying was basically she could hold a hearing on what of his acts involving everything surrounding January 6th that he's in relation to these crimes would be considered official acts, and Jack Smith could put his entire case out, all of it, all the witnesses, all the evidence, but there'd be no jury
right,
because it's just a hearing about this motion. But all of it would be public record.
right.
All of it would get into the media. And that, I think, would not only, like, if we think the blue wave is going to be big now, it would become a tidal wave if all of that information came out because of, you know, as bad as Donald Trump is, I think a lot of the public would look at, oh, they'd see all this and go, oh shit, you're supporting that? You're still
Right.
standing by him? You're still endorsing him?
Right.
Oh, fuck no. They'd forget about the TikTok ban. They'd forget about maybe some of the other small stuff they were pissed about. And it would be time to vote out a lot of Republicans.
Well, the Supreme Court, they have to be looking at the future. I know Republicans aren't known well for that, but they have to see the writing on the wall that the Democrats will have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Donald Trump will be out of the picture, and the Republicans will be weaker than they've ever been before. Now, that makes it ripe for some big changes in the Supreme Court, and I think there should be. The only person that is going to take a risk at that is Clarence Thomas, and Clarence Thomas does have a horse in the race, a dog in the fight. If Donald Trump gets immunity, that helps his wife, who was right in the thick of things on January 6th. He's got to try to do something to save his wife. It's not going to work. He's not going to get immunity. And when it's all said and done after the election, I guarantee you Ginny Thomas is going to get a fucking indictment because she's as guilty as anybody in this thing. And that's going to create a fucking mess for Clarence Thomas. And I suspect he'll retire just to get out of the spotlight.
Well, I said before when her name started getting brought up, I wouldn't be surprised if she never gets charged.
Right.
But right around the time that her name starts getting brought up about potential charges, that suddenly Clarence Thomas resigns and it's a backroom deal where he agrees to step down if she gets an immunity deal or something, or just they brush her under the rug, and it's some kind of a backroom deal. And then once he's out of the picture, I don't. Once he's off the court, I don't know if they could go back on that agreement because what could he do? He couldn't get his seat back.
Well, the only
So
thing, no, he couldn't get a seat back, and they could go back on the offer to Ginny Thomas. They probably wouldn't, but what they should do, they should add a caveat to giving her immunity. If we're going to give you immunity, Clarence has to leave, but you have to fucking testify. You have to sit up there and tell the
yeah,
truth. And if you commit perjury, that's not part of the deal. We're sending you to fucking jail. So you got to get something out of her if you cut that kind of deal more than, you know,
Oh,
letting Clarence off, because
that's
Clarence
true.
is involved in this shit too. There's no question about it.
And maybe there's some evidence that, they're waiting until they have complete control again to go after Ginny because um of Clarence, because maybe there's some evidence that he's involved too somewhere, because she talks about a couple of times about him in the court in some of the evidence that I've seen. So maybe there's something that ties him into this, and they're waiting, till they know they got the pieces in place in the House and the Senate to do something about him too.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no question he's committed crimes. I mean, he maybe doesn't have to recuse himself, but he isn't free of crimes. I mean, once they realize that Donald Trump has no immunity, certainly the Supreme Court justices don't. I mean, what he's done may not be enough for the Chief Justice or any of those other people to kick him out of there, but that doesn't mean the DOJ doesn't go after him if he actually committed crimes.
Right. And the only thing I know, the only immunity that I know they have is they cannot be charged for anything, I believe, that they do as an official thing as a Supreme Court justice.
Right.
Like, just because he ruled a certain way, they can't charge him.
No.
But if he's taking gifts and bribes under the table and not declaring it on his income taxes and committing tax fraud, that's not related to being a Supreme Court justice. That's just tax fraud.
Yeah, I may
Those two
be.
things aren't related.
No, they aren't. And I might be talking out of school here, but somehow I'm thinking getting a $250,000 RV and rolling around the country isn't an official act of a Supreme Court justice or getting money. Or
Doesn't seem like it to me.
no, no. It's yeah, I think Clarence Thomas is in trouble, and I think the best thing he could hope for is if he could cut a deal and just retire. But none of that is going to happen. That's what I keep telling people. People keep saying, why doesn't it happen now? Well, because the Republicans have still a little bit of a hold. And if they can go in and block it or obstruct it some way, they will. What we need is a clean slate. We need a clean path to get him out of there and then bum rush that motherfucker out of the Supreme Court and maybe Alito too. Um, there's more they should run out of there, but these are the true criminals in the Supreme Court at this point. They need to go. And I would have to believe the Democrats have been thinking about this and have ways to do it after the election. A lot's going to happen after the election.
Yeah, even if the Democrats somehow get control of the House, um, as early as maybe even this week, who knows? I don't think they're going to do anything about the Supreme Court until after the election, just because the Democrats always worry about the optics. And if they fuck with the Supreme Court prior to the election, it could look bad, and it could, even though they got everything going in their favor, that could fuck things up and they wouldn't try it.
Right. They're going to be very careful. They're going to walk softly and try to get through this election. And then afterwards, all hell is going to break loose.
Yeah. And like I said, even if they get the somehow get the House back, even, which could be this week, maybe, depending on what Marjorie Taylor Greene does.
Yeah.
Um, you know, who knows? But I don't think they're gonna do anything this term. They're gonna wait until after the election and deal with it then.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. Well, Eric, we're going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. Thank you for coming in and offering your insights and perceptions. I appreciate it immensely, and I know the listeners do as well. We'll get plenty of comments. So thank you for coming by.
Well, thanks for having me. I love being on the show.
Perfect. And don't forget to check out Eric on TikTok and YouTube. It's Analytical Iowan. Spell it out for him. So, because some people, I
A
don't
N
always.
A L Y T ANALYTICALIOWAN, I believe. I'm
Right.
doing it off the top of my head now. I have to stop and think about it.
Yeah. Analytical, ANALAN. A-N, okay,
Yep,
ANALYTICALIOWAN. That's
W-A-N, yep.
all right. Check him out on YouTube and TikTok. He's got some good stuff, and I'm seeing it all the time. And we want to build up his account because we need to get this same kind of word. The people of a like mind getting the word out and controlling the narrative. So those of you listening, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.